Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we are still in the middle of round 3 on night 2, but pretty sure the Giants are done for the night, so we figured we scramble, myself and producer Paul Wood, and put together our post-draft show night 2 for the New York Giants. It's been a busy day here, plus a long wait. The Giants finally went on the clock, and at number 65, the first pick of the third round, hit another one in our mock draft. The New York Giants selected Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander. I have been on Alexander for about a month and a half now. I think I've had him out of 8 Giants-only mock drafts. I probably had him in about 5 of them, not tallying up the numbers. But here, it was a direct hit at 65. And, look, the Giants went into the draft, and I can tell you they were going best player available. But for weeks now, the positions that they wanted to hit in this draft that have opportunities to crack the starting lineup are running back, because you can get someone to complement Tyrone Tracy; at guard, because the idea would be you can challenge Greg Van Roten, or you can switch over to left guard and move John Runyon Jr. to right guard. You also had potentially corner and a 3 technique at defensive line. And the 3 technique that the Giants liked all along was Darius Alexander. Let's talk a little bit about Darius Alexander, but before we get to that, I think it's important to mention the newbies from last night. Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart both made their way from Green Bay and Utah, respectively. Hopped on flights, got here. We had a press conference late afternoon here at 1925 Giants Drive, and Carter and Dart both hung out together. Then they did separately. Their families were here as well. We did press conferences, and I'll give you my biggest takeaway from those two, and then maybe we'll look ahead to tomorrow and see some of the things that we're expecting. But let's talk Darius Alexander a little bit. And we spent last year talking about how much of a lottery ticket it was to find a player who could play next to Dexter Lawrence. And Joe Shane said tonight, they always talk 4 hands about Dexter Lawrence. And what that means in simple terms is the fact that if you're going to have a double team on Dexter Lawrence on every play, you need someone next to him who can take advantage of one-on-ones, because you're going to get single blocks. And the way the Giants have constructed their defensive line and their defensive front, when you work in the edges with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and now Abdul Carter, but you can also mention Chauncey Golston as well, who I think will end up playing edge and as an interior pass rush, moving him up and down the line. He was a free agent they signed from the Cowboys. You were looking that one missing piece was that 3 technique, that idea of a player who can play next to Dexter Lawrence, take advantage with pass rushing skills, and get to the quarterback and disrupt and see if there was a way to pull some of the attention away from Dexter Lawrence. So we get Darius Alexander, 6'4", 310. Now it's very interesting because he played at Toledo, played there 6 years. He's 24 years old. And he came as a defensive lineman. They switched him to the offensive line, and then they flipped him back to the defensive line. And I actually asked him on a conference call tonight, does he ever think about where he would have been had he not switched from offensive line to defensive line? And he kind of laughed, and he said, well, I'm here now, so I don't have to worry about it, which, good answer. The Senior Bowl was big for Alexander. I talked to Jordan Reed, friend of the program, obviously, from ESPN, back at the Combine, and then after that, talked to him about Darius Alexander, and he said at the Senior Bowl, Alexander was unblockable. Now, if you remember, we had our shows at the Combine of All In, and 3 different analysts we had on. It was Jordan Reed, Dane Brugler of The Athletic, and Connor Rogers from NBC, all mentioned Darius Alexander as a potential day 2 3 technique for the Giants. And lo and behold, Darius Alexander, we nailed that pick. I mentioned it at pick number 60 that if he was still on the board, I thought the Giants would go with Alexander, and they did. A little nerve-wracking there a little bit because a couple defensive linemen came off the board. I thought it was going to be a big guy pick, either defensive line or an offensive lineman. Some of those guys were still on the board. A Marcus Mbow from Purdue. The Giants had him in for a 30 visit, but they stick with Alexander, and I think it was the right call. You have to take advantage of the depth of this defensive line, this class in the 2025 draft, and I think they did that by getting Alexander here. Now you bring him in with his personality. He's an eager guy, wanting to prove himself, a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and he comes here into a veteran-laden room with from Dexter Lawrence to Nacho to Roy Robertson Harris to Jeremiah Ledbetter. Golston will be in the defensive line room a little bit, and then when you spread it out and you talk the entire defensive front, when you match up the defensive line and the edges, then you're talking Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. So it's a good spot for a young player. Now, that's not to discount Elijah Chapman from last year, Elijah Garcia, Casey Rogers. All those guys showed glimpses when they were forced into action. But you're talking about undrafted rookies and guys who really had not had much playing time. Now they can kind of take a little bit of a step back and reset and try to continue to develop. Asked Alexander about his time here for the 30 visit. Joe Shane and Brian Dable both praised yet again Andre Patterson, defensive line coach, and assistant defensive line coach Brian Cox. And as I'm seeing tweets come up on here, I think Shedeur Sanders may have gotten drafted, but I'm not sure. Let me look and see if that happened. I don't think so yet. But Shedeur Sanders is thanking God for everything, and he hasn't been picked. It's 10:45. Before I get back to the Darius Alexander thing, an interesting thing happened today. New York Post, Steve Serby, who was on All In yesterday from the draft party, was able to get in touch with Lawrence Taylor, who he covered here. Told you Serby was the long-time, really the longest tenured New York sports writer in this area. And he actually covered Lawrence Taylor. So everything's been going on. Some of the, the scuttlebutt about whether or not Abdul Carter should try to wear 56. And Taylor essentially told Serby, yeah, that's not going to happen. He should pick his own number and make it his own. That's LT, and I don't really think it was a big deal, but of course it becomes a big deal when people start talking about it. I personally would not put him in 56. I would say go take a number. I think you got a better chance of convincing Phil Simms to give you 11 on the defensive side of the ball than you would LT giving you 56. And that kind of would have set a different bar for him. So I would say probably a good thing, but this tweet just came through from Abdul Carter, and I will read it to you. And it's obviously in response to LT's story in the Post. And he said the worst thing he could say was no. My stance don't change. LT is the GOAT, nothing but respect. This just going to make me work even harder. I love it. So that's the situation with 56. I think it's a good thing that Abdul Carter is not wearing 56. I do like the idea of LT saying, go pick a number and make it your own. LT, it's kind of how he ends up with his number. So as I just see it pop up on my phone, Paul also tells me Jalen Milroe just went to the Seattle Seahawks. So I think Dylan Gabriel also got picked too before Shedeur, which is really getting insane, and it's kind of wild, but it's the way things have broken down for this. And, you got to start to wonder where Shedeur Sanders is going to end up. Do the Chiefs take a chance on him and just have him as a backup and see how things go? We'll have to wait and see. Maybe a Kirk Cousins kind of thing with when they had RG3. It's very interesting to see how things have changed for Shedeur Sanders as opposed to how things. And part of it, I blame the media. We never adjust to the intel. I adjusted to the intel that I was getting back in February at the Combine. It was Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, or Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, but that was just based on the intel. That was really more personnel and scouting based. And then when the coaches get involved, that really changes things when teams get to spend more and more time with these players. And if you see my mock drafts, I moved off of Shedeur, especially at 3, but then later I still had him in the mix. Like Dane Brugler told me, the problem is that you couldn't just like Shedeur Sanders. Everybody felt as though you either had to love Shedeur Sanders or you had to hate Shedeur Sanders. And that created a very big divide here. And we're seeing how this is playing out now in the draft. So Cleveland's coming up, I believe, in the low 90s, as Paul tells me in our chat. So we'll see if the Browns take a shot at Shedeur now in the 3rd round. I don't think anyone would have expected that. So I want to get back. I know I got off track, but hopefully you guys kind of appreciate the real time of recording the show and just the idea of things we want to hit and things that are going on. Wanted to make sure we talked about Darius Alexander and then what happened today a little bit with Carter. I hit you with the Carter stuff, and then obviously Jackson Dart a little bit. So more Darius Alexander. Andre Patterson, according to Alexander, told him when he left here for his 30 visit, he said, if I can get my hands on you, I will come and get you. And the Giants rely on Andre Patterson, maybe more than any other coach besides Brian Daboll, for the players on this roster. And Andre Patterson has not disappointed. It's amazing that he's yet to get to coach a rookie as a first-round pick at defensive line. He gets a third-round pick today in Darius Alexander. I love the fit. I think you're getting a player whose upside and ceiling is really, really far away from where his baseline is right now. From things that I've said, read, heard, seen, Alexander really is a special pick. I gave it an A. I really think it's a knock it out of the park pick. I think the Giants have done great with their first 3 picks. I have Jackson Dart as a B. Part of that is the package that they gave, the fact that they were able to show patience in that trade back in, get the guy that they wanted based on the intel. As we said last night, whether or not the Rams were looking to get Jackson Dart in that spot was irrelevant. It was all about knowing the Rams had met with Dart and knowing that they were a possibility. They could not gamble and say, you know what, we're just going to see if he makes it to us, or we're going to go to 29 from Washington to see if we can get that trade. They went to 25. They knew the Rams and McVay had met with Dart. They weren't sure. And the idea that the Rams then traded out, there was a little speculation last night that the Rams just traded out after the fact. But when you look at the package that they got from the Falcons, a first-round pick, compare what the Giants traded, okay? It was a swap of picks. They traded 34, and they got 25, right? Then they gave them the third-round pick today, 99 overall, which was the comp pick for Xavier McKinney. And then they gave a third-round pick next year. Then you compare it one spot later. Now, I know the Falcons were a little bit further back than what the Giants were at 34. But the Falcons had to give up a 2026 first-round pick to the Rams to get that positioning at 26, to get Pierce, an edge rusher. I'm sorry. I know there's some of you who don't want to give Joe Shane any credit whatsoever. When it comes to this trade, it was masterful what they did. Now, Jackson Dart will now have to take care of everything else and to see if he can actually play in this league and become first, a consistent starter, B, a franchise quarterback. And that also goes on Brian Dable as well. So I think they've done a great job right now with the 3 picks that they've made. They were all on my board. They were all part of my favorite fits series, and we'll shift to tomorrow and possible targets. Now, guys could go off the board between now and the end of the round, but I'll give you some names to keep an eye on for tomorrow. All right, so that's Darius Alexander. I like him a lot. I think it was a great pick, and I think he will have an impact early on this season, and they'll work him in and see what they can do. So that's that. Now, earlier today, the connection I thought was very interesting with Jackson Dart and Abdul Carter. They both talked about chasing greatness. I mentioned the Abdul Carter and the Lawrence Taylor stuff. Jackson Dart mentioned Eli Manning stuff. It's very interesting because there are 2 points in this franchise. Lawrence Taylor gets drafted. They go on to win 2 Super Bowls. Eli Manning gets drafted. They go on to win 2 Super Bowls. Now, it wasn't a solo act for either of them. Now, obviously, LT is the greatest defensive player of all time, so we know his impact. And Eli is the greatest quarterback in Giants franchise history. No disrespect to Phil Simms or anyone else who played in this franchise at quarterback. You had some part-timers who split between this franchise and others, like a Frank Tarkenton, who's in the Hall of Fame, a Y.A. Tittle Hall of Fame, but there's nobody that matches Eli Manning. And I think it's interesting that Jackson Dart kind of chases that greatness and Abdul Carter chases the LT greatness. And they both mentioned how they wanted to chase greatness here. And that's the kind of room you want to build, the kind of locker room you want to build. And I just thought it was interesting that that those players were here and they talked about it and kind of embraced this role as to where they're at. So that's what I got off of today. Now let's look at I want to look at the NFL draft. I guess we'll say running draft results is probably good. Now let me look and see where we're at as I'm giving you some names to watch for the rest of the draft for tomorrow. Round 4, Giants are picking right off of the top of that. I think they're 105.
At some point in time, they're
so,
going to have to add a young quarterback.
Yeah, all right, we got to get Daniel Jeremiah muted. Apologize for that. All right, so we go Darius Alexander, Harold Fannin from Bowling Green, the tight end, went off the board. Kyle Williams, wide receiver, going to the Patriots. I'm looking to see if there are any other players that I had in my mix. Siobhan Ravel Jr., coming off an ACL, the corner from East Carolina, ended up going to the Cowboys. Dylan Fairchild, guard from Georgia, I had him. The Browns actually took Dylan Gabriel. So, boy, what has happened? Caleb Johnson, running back from Iowa, had him in a couple mocks. He goes to the Steelers, 83 overall. Jamari Caldwell, defensive tackle from Oregon. Savion Williams, wide receiver from TCU, went to the Packers. Let's see, who else we got? I mentioned you, Milrow. They're at pick 95, and then we're getting into the comp picks after this. So that's where we're at. I give you some names to watch for tomorrow. Let me call them up, and before we close out here and go with that, where are my day 2 picks to see who's still left? Day 2 targets. Cam Scatterbo from Arizona State, like him as a running back, obviously. I think he would be in play. Let me see where else we got. I thought that was what we picked, but all right, here we go. Let's go. I had Darius Alexander as my number 1 player today for the Giants. So Let's see. Who else is available? I had Scatabo. Let's see. Marcus Embow, the offensive lineman for Purdue. I think that's a possibility. Miles Frazier, offensive lineman from LSU. Jackson Slater, O-line from Sacramento State. Ty Felton, wide receiver from Maryland. Holland Pierce, the tackle from Rutgers. So that's kind of an idea as to where I've got. Like I said, I like Cam Scatabo. I think he would be a great pick at the start of the fourth round. I think it's 105 for the Giants. If not, I would go offensive line, and then you play it from here after that. So that's where we're at. We are finishing up day 2 here at the Giants facility. We'll be back at noon. And again, Shedeur Sanders is a story of the draft. It's wild. The fact that he is still not taken, and now that the Browns took Dylan Gabriel, all I can say is when you talk about Shedeur Sanders and the talent, and then you talk about everything that comes with it, it's hard to match up. The talent's got to be way above for people to go past this idea that you're going to deal with all the other stuff. Now, I don't think it's a Deion thing. I kind of wonder if it's Deion Sanders Jr. and all the video stuff. And, everywhere Shedeur goes, videos pop up online. I kind of wonder, because Shedeur's a good kid. I mean, there's nothing that's a red flag as far as character or anything like that. So we'll just have to see how things play out. I don't believe the Giants would ever be an option here. I don't think you're going to bring Shedeur Sanders in here to be a backup to the backup to the backup when you're trying to already have a rookie that you're going to develop in Jackson Dart. They kind of made that call at 25, and I think that's kind of where things ended with Shedeur. So we'll see. It may get to a point where Deion Sanders is calling in a favor, maybe to Jerry Jones in Dallas, to take Shedeur Sanders at some point. But we will be back tomorrow. Appreciate you being all in. Check out all our coverage on NorthJersey.com. Posted a column on Jackson Dart today. Hope you guys enjoy that. We'll be back tomorrow with all the stuff about undrafted rookies, and we'll see where we're at with the Giants. They have 4 picks tomorrow as of right now, a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and then 2 7s. So we'll see what they get from the draft after that. Again, for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on day 3 of the draft on Saturday. We're getting there. It's another long day tomorrow. We'll be here and ready to go. So again, for Paul, I'm Art. Have a great rest of your Friday night, and we'll check you out on Saturday from day 3 of the NFL Draft.